So Redbox, you have recently published the Being Human report, which I think looks at the current state of the conversational AI market. So the obvious place to start would be the sort of high level findings in terms of who's doing what with it and what more can be done.
Sure. Okay, Phil. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about the report, what that finds, and also I think to a certain extent we can talk a little bit about our experience. We have 1,300 customers globally in the contact center space, so we hear day to day, feedback on, what's happening in this particular marketplace. I think the backdrop for me is that, and probably the first time in my career, I've been in this industry for 25 years, we're now seeing a technology that is going to fundamentally, transform the way that organizations work. It's probably still early days, and the report talks about the fact it probably is early days to an extent. But longer term, for all stakeholders, be it the customer, be it your colleagues, be it the organization itself, we are going to see fundamental transformation. So the report points to the fact that almost everybody we're talking to, be it through people we spoke to in the report, or be it on a day-to-day basis, are going to invest in conversational AI and aspects such as real-time agent assist. I think we had 3% saying they didn't have that intention. How they go about that, some of the barriers and some of the blockers to adopting this technology, they're also detailed in the report, and I'll cover those a little bit later. But the obvious areas to start, I think, are things like customer experience. We're seeing that particularly detailed in the report from a UK perspective. As I said, real-time agent assist, affecting the role of the agent and how the agent interacts with the customer. And then, which was slightly a surprise, I suppose, in the report, saying on the US side, more around compliance and fraud prevention. So they tend to be the big areas that people are looking at right now.
And just in terms of that difference, because as you say, I think UK it was around customer experience, US employee experience, and then you say compliance, fraud prevention. Was there any reasons why you think the geographical differences, or just who's introduced conversational AI, which companies have been promoting it in which industries?
Right. It may be a timing factor. So, when you ask the question in the US now, certainly from our day-to-day experience, people are looking at real-time agent assist. People are looking at conversational AI in terms of customer and agent experience. So they are looking at that. They may now be moving to the next stage and looking more at fraud and compliance. So I don't think it's that they're not looking at there. It probably is just, as I say, a moment in time. And in terms of the UK, I think they are probably slightly behind in terms of adoption. So they're looking initially at customer experience and employee engagement and agent performance. So it's probably more that than anything else. I don't think either of these two markets, we spoke to 400 plus C-suite leaders in both markets. And I think both markets are looking at all the use cases for conversational AI and agent assist. I don't think there's that significant a difference.
In terms of people's plans, you say virtually everyone has it on their roadmap. Whether the survey reveals it or just, again, with you interacting with customers, potential and actual, do you think the rate of adoption, is it at all frustrating? Are you slightly bemused as to why? Or, as you say, is it just because the technology is so new, you fully expect people to kick the tires for a while and have a think about it before they start implementing it?
Yeah, I think people are implementing. I was speaking just yesterday to another senior contact center leader, and I think this idea that right now it's rudimentary in terms of its adoption. I hear people talk about the fact it's a bit clunky, it's non-integrated. So what we're seeing right now is people still overlaying this capability into an already existing, siloed approach to their infrastructure and to how they deal with the customer. So I think over time that will change. So I think we'll see more enterprise-wide adoption. Certainly we talk in terms of what we do about enterprise-wide rather than looking at a particular silo. And that's primarily because most conversations, most interactions do actually span across different touch points. So in many organizations, that could be contact center, it could be back office, it could be field staff, it could be mobile, etc. So I think we'll see a more integrated approach to the adoption. There have been, some, well-publicized reversals of the use of conversational AI. So in terms of it improving customer experience, it's done in some instances exactly the opposite. So I think you just need to be a little bit careful about how you align, particularly conversational AI, to customer intent. So what I mean by that, an example is I even had this myself a few days ago, trying to take a car off a multi-car policy. My intent was to take the car off the multi-car policy, but I ended up in a conversation about, was I going to buy a new car? Where was my home insurance policy? Where did that sit? At the end of all those interactions, I was told that I couldn't actually execute what I wanted to execute simply because I wasn't the policy holder, and I had to do it through a different channel, which then I had to enable myself. I wasn't handed off to the channel. So at times, I think, adoption can be frustrated by those type of experience in organizations. So for me, it's a matter of really stepping back a little bit and just taking more of that broader perspective on how you're going to implement the technology. And then if you're able to do this, start it on a more enterprise-wide or organizational perspective.
And the experience you reference, as you say, many of us have perhaps had similar ones on occasion. Yeah. Is that still the major roadblock, that people are skeptical that AI, conversational AI can ever be as nuanced and intelligent as, speaking to a human being? Because obviously you could have quickly just said, no, this is what I want, and they said, okay, I get it. Whereas because it was, a robot, you were never able to quite get across, what you wanted to talk about.
Well, if organizations, so for me, what organizations need to look at, and there's a parallel here for, the early, mobile app development, just choose very carefully how you align conversational AI. So what are you actually trying to achieve by implementing that type of technology? What particular customer intents, what part of the customer journey are you trying to automate? At the moment, it may be slightly too widely implemented. So just be careful about that, because we'll all remember that the early attempts at, mobile app development and deployment were, again, could be frustrating. Whereas now, I'm a Barclays customer. The mobile app for very simple execution is great, and I'll use it. It's efficient, it's effective, it gives a great experience. I think we'll end up in the same position with conversational AI. I think it's just going to take a little bit more refinement. And the other piece for me, both in terms of the vendors of this type of technology, but then also, the people who adopt, don't underestimate the investment you have to make in making sure that you're actually training for those intents, for those nuances, for language differences. Another example I was given in the airline industry, is a satchel the same as a rucksack? Well, nominally it's the same thing, right? You've lost your rucksack, you've lost your satchel, but would an AI engine understand satchel being rucksack, and etc.? So you've just got to make the right level of investment. If you do that, then clearly I think what you will see is customers just talk about the overall experience and not delineate between, was I actually talking to a conversational AI engine, or was I talking to a live agent? So hopefully that would just become an experience as a whole, because you still hear, and we all do it, I think, and maybe you do it yourself as well, people saying, I just want to talk to a human being. The measure for me is when we lose that and we don't continue to say, are we actually talking to a human being or an AI conversational capability? It makes no difference to us. Once we get to that point, I think that's probably the inflection point for me.
And do you think perhaps part of the problem is that the people look at AI, not just conversational, but across the whole, everyone seems to think that AI equals, replacing humans, whereas the more nuanced debate or argument is that they are augmenting humans, assisting humans, or doing repetitive tasks or simple things, as you say, that you can replace humans with that, but you still need humans, fairly front and center to deal with anything that AI is not able to.
Where I mean, maybe in 5 or 10 years it'll be different, but where the technology is today and in the near term, I think that's absolutely right. So you just need to segment out and say, agent performance, the life of the agent, turning all of your agents into the very best agent. AI can do that and can do that today. So that part is there, and you can implement that. So if I'm an agent talking to somebody and I'm fully informed about the person I'm talking to, I have far greater insight into the individual. I understand them. I understand their prior experiences, I understand where they are in terms of emotion and intent, I can understand that. If I have served to me in real time during my conversation the documents I need, the next steps that I need, and I do not forget to follow up on any particular action I agreed with the customer, you're turning the experience of being an agent into something very, very different. So in terms of that part of it, in terms of employee engagement, employee satisfaction, retention, training, I think that's there pretty much today if implemented correctly. So that piece you can do. The bit then you take out of that, which is just the much improved overall interaction between your people and your customers, and also in the background, the safety net of, are you compliant? Are you picking up? Are you listening? Are you understanding where any of these interactions could be fraudulent? I think that's there. So that's almost necessary to put that to one side. In terms of then taking part of your overall customer interaction and customer experience and putting that through conversational AI, then I think that still has some way to go. And you see many different vendors. And in the main, I think, go with vendors who are subject matter experts. You wouldn't put a generalist, contact center agent into, say, insurance if they came from the airline industry. You wouldn't do that. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You do want somebody who understands subject matter. So the same is true for conversational AI. That bit, I think, still needs some work. And I think that's about really tying down what part of the overall customer journey you're trying to cover off. And can you cover that off? And can you yourself create conversations that make sense, are efficient, that are a good experience for the customer? Can you do that? And does that then actually take away demand from the contact center or your customer facing agents? Because in my example, it didn't do that at all. It frustrated me, and then there was still a call back from the contact center. So it didn't really deliver on either fronts. So I think in one area, it's there if you implement it correctly. In conversational AI, it will be a fundamental game changer over the next few years. As it says in the report again, people are anticipating it in 3 to 5 years, in some instances 10 in others. I think that will happen. I think there's still some way to go. And the piece that, when you look at the report, some of it I would have probably anticipated, maybe the use cases I would have anticipated, but just looking at the report and people's perception. And I do wonder whether when you look at the report, people are talking about how they see things today or how they're going to see things in the future. So I don't know if you saw that the ones that surprised me were understanding emotion and sentiment, that people marked AI ahead of human beings today. I find that slightly surprising finding. I suppose it's down to what you mean by understanding. So that was one, and just general problem solving. I think AI will get there, and conversational AI will get there. I don't see many implemented on scale examples of both of those today, but that's where I think organizations need to get to.
And in terms of other possible sort of stumbling blocks along the way, the IT industry seems to be suggesting that there's a lack of skills. So I'm wondering if that matters, although if there are companies like yourself obviously can provide the solutions, is it more the mindset within the companies that want to deploy it? And perhaps to that point, as again with a lot of new technologies, you need a champion within an organization, and maybe at board level, are we lacking people who either understand what it can do or saying, yes, we need to move in this direction? So I guess sort of skills and championing, if that makes sense.
You certainly need a champion at the board level. Some of my career was working for 4.5 years with an end user with a FTSE 100 insurer, and I ended up running their European operation out of Frankfurt. And there's the day-to-day, there's the day-to-day operations, there's the legacy considerations, there's the maintenance of your existing infrastructure, and then there's overlaying this type of technology. So you have to have somebody who's going to champion that within the existing operation and at the heart of the operation. Sometimes some of this gets hired out into innovation or put to one side. So I think it has to be at the heart of the operational aspect of the company. If you've got a champion in that space, I think that helps. Mindset, I think the mindsets are moving to this space already. So I don't think there's a huge issue in terms of the mindset. As I say, it may be just a bit too broadly cast at the moment in terms of what AI can and cannot do, but I think the mindset is there. The barriers are pretty significant in terms of, just me in terms of my personal data and corporates in terms of their data, just simply being able to get control of the data. So where is the data? Can I get control of it? Can I get access to it? Can I get access to it in real time? Is it of the quality I need to feed into AI engines? All of those, they're many of the issues that we address in terms of our platform. But certainly at the moment, in terms of a lot of the legacy infrastructure that's in place, that's not ideally positioned to support these initiatives. So there's some work to be done there for most organizations. Very few organizations would say that they really have sovereignty over their own data. They can use the data in the way they want to, when they want to. And the whole siloed, non-integrated part is even a bigger challenge, I think, for most organizations. So capturing conversations in the contact center isn't actually understanding the customer, because the customer's experience will span much more than just the contact center. And very few organizations have a fully integrated data strategy to support AI. And you have to, my opinion, and I kind of would say this one time, but in my opinion, you have to start there. You have to start with the data that supports what you're trying to do with AI.
And moving on, I mean, in terms of what Redbox does, so what is it that you offer your customers in terms of some or all of the things we've been discussing in terms of helping them on that journey to make conversational AI a reality and bring some benefits with it?
Yeah, so we cover off with Conversa as our enterprise platform. I think it's fair to say it's the only truly open enterprise platform. And effectively what we say to our customers and what we allow them to do, we allow them to capture every single conversation across the whole of the enterprise. So whether that's customer facing conversations, whether it's conversations between colleagues, we can capture every single conversation, and we capture it with a quality in the audio itself and with associated metadata, and we deliver that real time to any partner they have. So we give them control over their data, we give them access to the data, and we give them the freedom to choose any applications. Again, in the market we're moving into, you'll see yourself, there are many, many new vendors, quite exciting vendors out there. A lot of our customers are still pretty much tied, and you'll see the report again, vendor lock-in. They're tied to some existing vendors who are probably perfectly capable, but that open mentality, open ecosystem certainly is where we're at and where a lot of our customers want to move to. So we provide that capability as a foundational element to AI. And that's Redbox's part in the overall market.
And in terms of putting together, if a company's looking at putting together a sort of conversational AI strategy, would they be able to do that all through one company like yourself, or do they need a wider ecosystem, or can you manage that on their own? I'm just wondering, because you're saying obviously the data is a critical part. Do they need to get in, a data analytics company? Well, how does a comprehensive solution, what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the size of the organization and exactly their deployment path and what they're trying to achieve in what timescale. But typically, organizations will already be talking to the key players in this market, whether it's around conversational AI or whether it's around agencies. They'll be talking to those organizations already when we get involved. They may well have one of the consultancies or one of the largest systems integrators involved as well, so they may be involved. And typically they'll come across one of these key blockers in terms of actually implementing the strategy, and that's when we tend to get involved. And we just help them, and we help them through this process in a manner that allows them to maintain their existing infrastructure. So for us, this isn't about replacing everything you have, it's more about freeing up your data. So we have an overlay strategy that allows us to extract data from existing legacy systems, which I think is important because, particularly where we are today in the marketplace, motivating large scale system renewal, full scale system renewal is difficult. But if there's a solution ourselves and some of our partners that allow you to extract the data and just gain much greater value from that data, whilst not disrupting your main contact center infrastructure, I think that's a viable solution for most people. And we're seeing significant adoption on that basis.
Okay, and maybe just in sort of conclusion, for folks that are either beginning to look at conversational AI, or even those that have started on the journey and it's maybe not quite delivering, in ways that they had hoped, are there any, one or two key pieces of advice you give, end users as they start, or want to get more out of their projects? What are the sort of things they should be looking out for when they're talking to companies such as yourself?
Yeah, I think it's not dissimilar to other major projects. So be very, very clear on the outcomes you're trying to achieve, the stakeholders that you're trying to benefit in what you're looking to do. Be realistic in terms of the time scales and returns. I've been in this industry a long time, you probably have as well. There's a fair degree of hype around everything. There always is when this type of stuff comes to market. So just be very realistic in terms of what you're trying to achieve. I would say ourselves, but other organizations, reach out to organizations that are specialists in your area. So if you're looking at fraud, or you're looking at financial services, or you're looking at collections, whatever it happens to be, I will be talking to organizations that have done this on numerous occasions, have invested in their AI capabilities, have looked at the different customer intents and the outcomes, and can show you that they've done that in real practical implementations. To do that first of all, and then set, as I say, I would go with an initial pilot with a number of users, experiment to see how that works, iterate, be willing to teach and train the engine as much as possible to the particular nuances of your company, even as opposed to your sector. If you're willing to go through that journey, then you'll start to see the benefits.
Excellent. Well, appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing your insights. So Richard, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, great to talk to you. Thanks for your time.